going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImacSports.
Instagram is also at ImacSports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 224. Merry Christmas, Kyle.
Yeah, Merry Christmas Eve. It kind of fits, I guess, that it's 224 on December 24th. So that kind of makes sense there. But Merry Christmas.
Yeah, we're going to keep it short and sweet today. This afternoon. Sheesh. 11:30, not a normal time, but we got to do some Christmas stuff. You know how it goes. Next week, college football. Got a little bit of time in between. There'll be another episode, so we're going to stick to things that happened this week. Yeah.
And before we get into the episode as well, too, obviously there's a big passing in the baseball world with Rickey Henderson this past week. We're not going to go on it too long because there's been so many things about him. And I think some people's others' experiences with him is probably a bit better than us saying it because we never really got to see him play. But obviously still had a ton of impact in the franchise that we, call our team with the A's and especially with the Oakland A's specifically. And I guess the main thing I want to say is that it's just so shitty on the A's that there is no proper way for them to mourn. I know there's been flowers and stuff at the A gate at the Coliseum, but obviously that's still not justice to him, in my opinion. There obviously should have been a Rickey Henderson statue outside of the Coliseum 15, 20 years ago easily. Something that never happened. And now there isn't. You can't even go on social media under the A's post and comment, your favorite memory or something with him. Just completely mishandled the situation. And, I'm not surprised they mishandled it. They've mishandled a lot of things. But this is a big one. And this is something that obviously hurts the community a lot. But RIP to perhaps one of the greatest players of all time.
Yeah, definitely the most infamous Oakland A, like you said. And I know a lot of people go to the Moneyball era, but you don't have that without Rickey on and off the field, everything he did for that area. And kind of weird. I guess they gave him the name of the field instead, but with the Rickey Henderson Field, but not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely had the most aura of an EA of all time, that's for sure. But moving on into the episode as we continue on, we'll start off with the openers. And my opener is going to be a bright side for the Raiders defense that has not had a lot of bright sides this year. Injuries have been terrible with this team. It's something that we know. Malcolm Kuntz got hurt before the season, somebody who had a great end of the 2023 season and was expecting big things in 24. Got hurt prior to the season, out for the entire season. Christian Wilkins, big offseason signing, only played 5 games. Marcus Epps tore his ACL after 3 games. Jacorian Bennett, who's been a breakout corner for us and kind of locking down teams' number ones. Saw that against Jamar Chase earlier in this year when he held him to 43 yards. He's only played 10 games this year. Nate Hobbs only played 10 games this year. Max Crosby's only played 12 games this year. But one of the guys that has really stepped up in absence of all that is K'Lavon Chaisson, and the stuff that he's done, especially within the last 4 games since becoming a full-time starter with this team, has been pretty impressive. A sack and a half against the Kansas City Chiefs on that Black Friday game was a big game for him. And then against the Bucs, he had a half sack and a pick. And then this past week against the Jags, he had a sack and almost another interception that he ended up dropping. But still, being super impactful on the ball, a guy that we both kind of liked coming out of college during his time at LSU, first-round pick with the Jags in 2020. Seems to be finding his home with the Raiders and could be a potential star because he is still only 25 years old.
Hinted at it earlier when I was talking in the opening, literally speechless when thinking about the college football playoff games. So unfortunately, that's not part of my opener. My teams didn't play well. The Warriors, the Jets, I got to see our first round pick get carted off the field. So terrible. So I guess the next closest connection I had to a game was Minnesota at Seattle. That was Sam Darnold against Geno Smith, 2 of our former quarterbacks. And Sam Darnold ended up slaying Geno in this one, a ridiculous, almost 360 one-footed touchdown pass to Jettis to win it, and Geno threw a couple picks, so that was the deciding factor. I guess I'm happy for these two teams. They got something out of these quarterbacks that we couldn't.
Yeah, two gunslingers.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, though, to our player, defensive player, and rookie of the week, same thing that we do every week. We'll start off with the player of the week together. A couple different good options here. Who do you end up choosing?
Saquon was pretty close again for me, but no one had a week like Jonathan Taylor did for the Colts. 29 carries, 218 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That win against Tennessee is ultimately not going to matter that much now that Indy's been eliminated, but this was definitely one of Jonathan Taylor's best career days.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor is going to be my player of the week as well, too. Skyler already said the stats, so I won't repeat them for you. But very reminiscent of the Alvin Kamara 6-touchdown performance on Christmas a couple of years ago. As far as fantasy clutch performances go, this definitely goes down there for people in their fantasy playoffs right now that just won their league or got to the championship based off of that. So Jonathan Taylor is my player of the week. Defensive player of the week.
Kenny Moore is going to be an honorable mention for me. Another Colt with 2 interceptions, but since their game didn't really have a lot of impact towards anything in the league, let's go with something else. This is a name that means a lot to you after what happened. I'm going to go with Isaiah Palomau of the Raiders. He's really looked like one of the best players on the field whenever I watch the Raiders. And of course, I was watching this one for draft purposes, but the Raiders probably don't win this one without him. He had a really big forced fumble, probably the biggest play of the game, and definitely takes after Troy in a lot of ways. That guy hits really hard.
Yeah, no, I like Palomau. He's had some limited play time. Now that Epps has been out for so long, he's really starting to take over the starting role. Him and Trayvon Merrick. So two young safeties that are fun to watch for the Raiders team for sure. My defensive player of the week, I decided to go a game that had a bit more playoff impact. I guess now that the Bucs lost, it had a lot more playoff impact. But I'm going Matthew Judon of the Falcons for his sack and pick 6 performance that he had against the Giants. The pick 6 kind of just fell right into his hands. So it's not like he made a crazy play, but still getting in the end zone as a defensive player definitely means a ton in this day and age. So Matthew Judon not having the greatest season, I would say, but having a lot of impact in this past Sunday's game. On to Rookie of the Week.
It's Jaden Daniels of Washington. Maybe things look a little different here if Jalen Hurts doesn't go down with the concussion, but Jaden Daniels still took down the Eagles, who had been the top dogs as of recent. Jaden Daniels had 5 touchdowns, almost 400 all-purpose yards, close divisional win, pretty much locks up a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to be Jaden Daniels here. And you can make a case for some other guys, even though they didn't win their games. I think Caleb Williams played really well again, and what's been honestly a really good rookie season showing from him. But Jaden Daniels is my Rookie of the Week for sure. 24 for 39, 258 through the air, 5 touchdowns passing. Did have 2 interceptions, but definitely made up for that, as well as his 9 carries for 81 yards on the ground as well, too. To find a way to win that game, I know it's against Kenny Pickett, so it's not like winning this game means you're going to the Super Bowl or something like that, but to find a way to come back against an Eagles defense that is a damn good squad, it definitely means something for the Commanders. And I know Commanders fans are probably so used to losing games like that where they go down 14-0 and then just end up losing 35-7. But to have that guy that's able to come back and able to make plays for you, regardless of the 2 picks or not these thrown earlier in the game, is really cool for them, I can imagine. And can't say I didn't see this coming with him. Moving on, though, to our 2025 QB predictions. This is always a segment that we like to do towards the end of the football season because there's a ton of speculation for who's going to be teams' quarterbacks in the next year. Some more than less, of course, but we'll go team by team and kind of say who we think maybe their week 1 starter is, or if they draft a guy, who that guy is. And so we'll start off with the AFC East. Bills, we're not going to go over that one. That seems pretty obvious. I think the Patriots with Drake May seems to be a pretty clear shot as well, too. Dolphins and Jets maybe less as a lock than the Bills and the Patriots. But what are your 2 quarterbacks for the Dolphins and the Jets?
For Miami, I think Tua will get another shot as the starter for sure. He's come back strong. They're probably not going to the playoffs, but they definitely look better with guys healthier. I definitely think they take a guy on day 3, maybe Jackson Dart. has a little Alex Smith in him, and maybe Mike McDaniels will keep taking shots to try to find his Brock Purdy.
No. Yeah, for the Dolphins, I also have Tua. Last year was my big speculation trade where the Cowboys traded Dak to the Dolphins for Tua and some picks. That did not happen. I don't think it's going to happen this year either. Although I think if it were to happen, it'd definitely benefit the Dolphins. But Tua stays there. What about the Jets?
I have the Jets standing pat here with Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor. I really think that if Rodgers retires, they're not going to go with the veteran route. It's going to suck to see guys like Garrett Wilson get traded when that happens. But I'm going to try to stay positive and say we run it back. Aaron Rodgers had basically the second best Jets quarterback season ever. It's obviously not his fault. Maybe inside the locker room, but not on the field. So we'll try one more year, see what happens.
I wanted to just put Aaron Rodgers and be done with it, but I know it's not going to be that simple with the Jets. It never is. And so this might be the worst case scenarios that I'll go with. So scenario goes into the offseason. Aaron Rodgers is expected to come back. Draft happens. Jets maybe take a 6th round QB or 5th round QB, expecting Rodgers to be back, whatever. Training camp rolls around. He's not there. He's just doing Aaron Rodgers things. It's kind of unheard of. And then we get a couple of weeks before the season and he just says, fuck it, I'm done. And that would put the Jets in a very shitty spot. So at that point in the season, maybe they, send a 7th round pick to whatever team had Joe Flacco and they get Joe Flacco back. But the other guy that I had them drafting is Kyle McCord. So my Jets scenario here is Kyle McCord / Joe Flacco. This would be the worst case scenario, obviously, of course, but with Aaron Rodgers, you never really know what that guy's going to do. So
we've seen worse happen than that. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. That's why I'm laughing, because that could definitely happen.
Yeah, I felt bad putting that on there, but you never really know with the Jets. It's kind of crazy. Moving on, though, to the AFC North, a bit less speculation in this division than some other divisions, I would say. Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson obviously are locks. And then we get to the Steelers and Browns, who are in some interesting QB spots. Who do you have for the Steel Curtain being the quarterback next year?
I'm going to keep Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. He's done a great job this year and definitely looks more like the Seattle Russ than the Denver Russ. Maybe he just needed some more help around him, but it kind of seems like a perfect pairing there. I don't think Justin Fields comes back, though. Maybe that's a drafted guy or maybe another veteran. You never know with Pittsburgh, but they're never going to put themselves in a situation where a guy like, Rudolph in Tennessee is going to start a game. So definitely some veterans.
Yeah. I also have Russell Wilson as a starting quarterback for the Steelers. I think his play has definitely determined the likelihood that he comes back this next season for the Steelers is just kind of the guy that Mike Tomlin likes. We saw him even go to Russell Wilson when they were winning with Justin Fields. So definitely shows the confidence that Tomlin and that staff have in Russell Wilson. Fields should be leaving, I'd imagine, in free agency because he is a free agent, obviously for like a backup job or something like that. So I do think they draft a guy, though, just in case Russell Wilson gets hurt. And I think that could be a Jackson Dart type of guy. So I'd say Russell Wilson / Jackson Dart, even though Russell Wilson would obviously be the starter. Now to the Browns, which have perhaps the most interesting QB situation going into the offseason, or maybe the most complicated QB situation with Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, and the rest of the guys that they have over there. Who do you think is their starter next year?
I think week 1, we're probably looking at Deshaun Watson again, even though I would not touch that with a 10-foot pole. It's just really hard to get out of that contract at the moment. And the moment they do is probably the moment they start the rebuild. So I'm going to have them drafting Jalen Milroe in the 2nd round. Who knows what his projection looks like? I'm not as confident as Alex is in Jalen Milroe becoming a downfield passer, but hey, he's a good playmaker at least.
Yeah, I also have Deshaun Watson as the first guy. I think the contractual situation is just in such a bad spot where you kind of just have to stick it out with him at least for one more year. But I do also think they draft a guy, and I also had that guy being Jalen Milroe in the 2nd round. It seems to be where he's mocked now at this point. is an early second-round pick, and I think fitting with the Browns will make a lot of sense there. Now on to the AFC South, a couple of guys who, again, seem to have their spots locked up with C.J. Stroud and likely Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Nodding your head, so I assume those are
yes, sir.
The same for you. But the Colts and Titans maybe less confident in their guys. Who do you have for the Indianapolis Colts being their starting QB next year?
I still got Anthony Richardson. I think they're going to give him another full season at least to see what happens. And you got to remember, not every young quarterback is going to be ready to go in their first 2 years. We see it all the time. We see even Bryce Young just sitting for a couple of weeks and watching and coming back and looking much better. Anthony Richardson's going to stick around a little longer.
Yeah. I have Anthony Richardson here too, but with the Kirk Cousins situation, with him likely being cut by the Falcons and still being owed a ton of money by them, I definitely think sets up a scenario where he can sign for, like a minimum. With the Colts, kind of similar to what happened with Russell Wilson last year with the Steelers and the Broncos. So I have Kirk Cousins going to the Colts to, I would say back up, but I wouldn't also say start over. Anthony Richardson, just kind of have a fluid situation with those guys. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is the guy that you want to start, but if you can't start him and the team's still trying to compete, then I think you move to Kirk Cousins, and I think with his situation, he should be relatively cheap to get. On to the Titans.
With the Titans, I'm going to have Sam Darnold as the week 1 starter with Will Levis still on the roster. What is adding another young guy to this quarterback room going to accomplish? That's not what they're trying to do. Darnold brings the more veteran presence and a bigger one than Mason Rudolph will ever have. So I don't think it's the right choice to take a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, I don't have him taking a quarterback in the first round, but I do have him trading for a quarterback, and this is where I have J.J. McCarthy landing. Brian Callahan gets his guy, or is it Bryce Callahan? I don't know. It's one of the Callahans. Yeah, Brian Callahan. He finally gets a young quarterback in J.J. McCarthy that seems a bit more likable and a bit more, consistent in the mind with J.J. McCarthy than Will Levis is. Maybe not the same arm talent, but still a pretty good player in J.J. McCarthy. With the Vikings' word spot, I guess this kind of reveals who I think is going to be the Vikings week 1 starter now with McCarthy gone. But I think the Titans situation is something that could work out for them, and they could give up maybe a second-round pick for him this year. Now on to the AFC West. 3 spots very much locked up here with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, the Chargers and Justin Herbert, and then the Broncos with their newly rookie quarterback, Bo Nix.
Yep.
And then one that is not locked up at all with the Raiders. Obviously, it could be a very interesting situation here as well, too. Who do you think is the quarterback for the Silver and Black?
I have had to recently change this pick after what happened on Sunday, but it's not going to be too different here. I have the Raiders taking Cam Ward, even if they have to trade up for him. This kind of seems like the kind of draft class where the guys who really need a quarterback are going to go get it. No one's just going to take one if you're not really sure if they're good or not. And I think Cam Ward is one of those guys who's good. I've compared him to Steve McNair. And I really love that comparison because he may not be a Hall of Famer. He may make a lot of mistakes, but he's a Tennessee legend, Steve McNair, even though he's not a Hall of Famer. He went on a couple good playoff runs, and I think Cam Ward could do that for the Silver and Black.
Yeah, I was in a weird spot here because it's kind of getting conflicted on who's going to be the top quarterback in this draft at this point. I think some like nerds are saying it's Cam Ward, but I think the general consensus is Shadur at number 1. At the Giants, I don't think they win a game, so that kind of tells you where they're going. But I do have the Raiders picking 4th in this scenario behind the Patriots and the Browns at 2 and 3. I just said that the Browns, I don't think, go for a first-round quarterback and instead opt for Jalen Milroe. So I think at number 4, that opens up a chance for the Raiders to take Cam Ward. He's an interesting guy. Obviously, I think he has a ton of potential. And I think what he's shown just in the last 3 years alone is just he's continuously gotten better. And he's starting at Incarnate Word to go into Wazoo, to go into Miami, to be in a Heisman finalist in New York. He's made a huge step up each year, and that gives me a vote of confidence in him. He's got the size, the strength, the arm, the ability to move, the nonchalantness that he has is very, very confident at the quarterback position. That's why I'd be okay with him handing off the reins or getting the reins in the next year And then also the backup, I have AOC. So I think he stays there as well, too. Gardner Minshew gets cut.
Yeah.
On to the NFC side now. Started with the NFC East. Eagles, Commanders, Cowboys all, I would say, stick with their guys of Hurts, Daniels, and Prescott.
Yes.
But the Giants likely going to be the team with the number one pick. Shedeur Sanders has got to be, right?
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot of rumors, I guess you could call them, about which quarterback the Giants actually love. But I think when you're talking about the number one overall pick, you want to make sure you get a guy who's ready to play. And I think with Shedeur Sanders, you're kind of hoping for a Jared Goff situation. You know that he doesn't have the physical capabilities of some of the other guys, but if he's smart enough, if he makes the right reads, if he has ridiculous anticipation like he did in college, this is probably the guy you want to take at number one.
I also have Shedeur being the number one guy for the Giants. I think if you look at a rookie that can handle the New York media that seems to swallow so many young quarterbacks in, or even veteran quarterbacks in with Daniel Jones, like Shedeur is going to be the guy that can handle that at that point. And that's why I think he'd be a good quarterback for, the Giants or the Raiders, any of those big market teams, because he's been in the spotlight his entire career. Everybody knows who he is. There is no, who's this guy? You know who Shedeur Sanders is when you walk into the building. And I think that's the type of guy that the Giants want. I think this is the type of guy Malik Neighbors wants as well, too. And I think they're going to have to add substantially around them to even be somewhat competitive still, because this team sucks regardless, even if it's with Shedeur. But I also have Drew Lock sticking around. That one maybe less confident in, but it's just a backup.
Yeah, I think Jones is gone. Yeah.
Moving to the NFC North,
He's
the
already
Packers
gone.
Moving to the NFC North, the Packers, Lions, Bears seem to be pretty confident in their guys of Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings, a bit different spot. You already had Sam Darnold going somewhere else. So who do you think is the Vikings starting quarterback next year?
I still think it's J.J. McCarthy. Guys who win always get their opportunity. I still believe that if he was healthy, he would be the number one guy on Minnesota's depth chart. That's why I'm going to keep him there. I think they probably value him a lot higher than the rest of the league does. And I think he should be fine. Obviously, they got a pretty good system if Sam Darnold's able to potentially get a number one seed in the NFC this season.
I think if the Vikings go 15-2 or 14-3, it's going to be so hard to pull away from Sam Darnold. And I know it's going to be tough giving him, $55 million next year or whatever it is, but I think you got to do it for the ability that he's shown this year, and to just so quickly understand that O'Connell offense and to flourish in it so quickly, have the receivers all around him, have the playmakers to be really good. I really like Sam Darnold to stay there. J.J. McCarthy obviously has, I assume, learned a lot this year, just being hurt and watching however many games they've played at this point. But I think when you are as good as the Vikings are right now, you see a sure thing in Sam Darnold and you see an unsure thing in J.J. McCarthy. I think they're going to go with the comfortable choice here and stick with Sam Darnold. Is it the right choice? I have no clue. But it feels like the easy choice right now for the Vikings.
Yeah, if he's willing to take a one-year deal, sure.
Yeah. Moving to the NFC South, it does seem like the two teams with young quarterbacks, Bryce Young and Michael Penix, the Falcons and the Panthers, should probably stick with those guys, unless the Falcons draft another quarterback in the first round, which will be kind of weird. But those two guys seem to be there. Baker Mayfield seems to be staying in Tampa Bay. But the Saints situation, again, one of the more complicated ones in football with Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, and likely a guy to be drafted as well, too. How do you think that plays out?
I think that Spencer Rattler is going to stick around in New Orleans. Last night wasn't pretty, but I thought he played all right considering the guys around him. His number one receiver was Dante Pettis, and technically Foster Moreau, but he's a tight end, of course. I also have Justin Fields going there. He would be my week one starter. I think Justin Fields is going to want to start. Maybe he thinks that he's ready to go, and maybe he is. He played pretty well in Pittsburgh through the first half of the season. I just don't really see them drafting someone, so they're going to have to go somewhere else, right? And I don't think it's going to be Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. So the Saints, I had him going with Quinn Ewers as a second-round pick. I don't think what Quinn's shown this year has shown that he's going to be a first-round pick, but I think maybe the pro day and maybe the combine can show that he has the ability to still be a starting quarterback in this league. And I think the Saints take a shot on him in the second round. I didn't have a spot for Fields, and I think this can also kind of fit for Fields as well too. So maybe have a mix of those guys, but I definitely don't think Rattler is going to be the guy. I know he hasn't had shit, but in the games that he's played, they've all lost, and they haven't been particularly great showings either, even with the bad targets that he's had. So I don't think Carr stays. I don't think Rattler's the choice. So I'll go Ewers / Justin Fields. On to the NFC West, last division we got. Starting off with the Rams, who seem to be sticking with Stafford. I also had him drafting Carson Beck in like the third or fourth round. I don't think he goes high at all now with his procedure going on with his arm. And I think the Rams could be a team that is willing to take a shot on him in one of the mid rounds. And then I also have the Cardinals and the Seahawks and the Niners sticking with their guys with Kyler, Geno, and Brock Purdy. But I also have the Niners taking Dylan Gabriel as well too in like the fourth or fifth round because he seems to be a guy that can handle that offense pretty easily.
I had the Rams as a potential spot for Gabriel or even Quinn Ewers if he falls even further. I don't know. Texas is still winning, so I guess that's a positive. Stock can only go up from here. Seattle was a weird one for me, though. I have a weird quarterback triangle there with Derek Carr and Daniel Jones being available. I have both of them joining Geno Smith and just having a ridiculous wheel of quarterbacks because this is another team I just can't see them drafting a guy early. Maybe instead of a Derek Carr, they would take a guy in the fourth round, but I just feel like these are guys that are too good to not be on a roster. So I stuck them all in Seattle.
Not all of them can be wrong, right? Yeah. Someone's got to land there.
Somebody.
But that's our predictions for QB 2025. It's not as exciting as I would say some of the previous years, but there's definitely a solid 4 or 5 teams that really need to, take the next step at quarterback, and we'll see how that goes in the future. Obviously, we're still miles away from the draft, and probably even get a QB trade this offseason. You never know. So that's that. We'll move on, though, to some MLB grades from the moves over the past week. There's been 10, I would say, substantial or impactful moves in the MLB over the past week, and we'll start off grading them. As far as I think we're going technically in chronological order, so starting from the farthest back to now. And this past week, we saw Max Kepler go to the Phillies. 1 year, $10 million. What's your grade on this guy?
I'm going to give the Phillies a B+ for bringing in Max Kepler. I know you had mentioned wanting to see Philly go after some bigger named bats than a Max Kepler, but the Phils are getting 10 years of consistency with this guy's. I get what they're trying to do. You can't have guys struggling in the outfield and forcing guys like Christian Pache and Whit Merrifield and Weston Wilson hitting in meaningful games. These guys hit in playoff games, some of them. So I get what they're trying to do.
No. I wasn't a huge fan of this move. Like you said, I wanted the Phillies to add more this offseason, and they haven't really done much on the offensive side of the ball. Max Kepler is a guy that doesn't really move the needle for me either. He's had one good offensive season since 2021. Since then, he's kind of been right around league average, just slightly below. I give it a C+. I don't love it. I know it's better than Weston Wilson or Christian Pache or Johan Rojas taking at bats for you, but it's still like Austin Hayes level. Like it's not anything crazy. So I give it a C+. Moving on to the Houston Astros, new first baseman Christian Walker, who signed a 3-year for $60 million deal.
I'm going to give Houston an A. They got great value for one of the best first basemen in the league. Houston's been able to stay competitive while moving on from some fan favorites in the past, and I don't see why Christian Walker won't be slowing down anytime soon. Or I don't see him slowing down anytime soon.
I like Christian Walker as well too. One of my more favorite underrated players in baseball these past few years with the Diamondbacks. He's been a perennial 3-WAR player that is good on both sides of the ball. He's got gold gloves, and I don't think he has a 40-homer season, but if he doesn't, then he's super close to it in previous years. So he's a stud already, 33 though, so maybe the age getting up there, 36-year-old. That last year might be a little bit tough, but I think he'll be fine in that category. The only thing that brought it down for me is that they're also paying Jose Abreu technically still at this point. So they're kind of devoting $40 million to the first base position this year, which I'm not a huge fan of. I like the move specifically, but the money situation is just, so I give it a B+. Moving on to Patrick Sandoval, going to the Boston Red Sox. Surely this will work out better than the Pablo Sandoval signing for the Boston Red Sox. 2 years for $18.25, fully guaranteed to Patrick Sandoval, even though he'll most likely not play the first season due to getting Tommy John in late June this past year.
Yeah, I was going to say similar to Pablo, though, probably going to play a similar amount of games. I did give Boston a B for this one. There's always a lot of risk when it comes to Tommy John surgery, but Boston's done this before. They just did it with Lucas Giolito last season. They really needed some lefties in that rotation, and this is a team that can afford to take these kind of risks. They have a loaded farm system, so if they get into some real trouble, they could easily make some moves.
Yeah, this is very similar to Lucas Giolito last offseason, like you said. They signed a 2-year deal, with the first year likely being out completely with Tommy John, or I don't know if Giolito had Tommy John, but something, major arm surgery. I don't see this as that risky of a signing either, because the 18.5 or 18.25 million, my bad, over the 2 years isn't anything particularly crazy for a guy who has the ability to be a middle of the rotation starter. I think also they're not relying on him to be in there. It's just like a added bonus if he gets into that rotation, because they got 5 guys already that you can kind of rely on, especially with Giolito hopefully coming back this year. That would be the 6th guy. So I give it a B. I think it's low risk, high reward for a guy that can be kind of solid and has good stuff, just hasn't had good results over this past year or two. Next up, former MVP going to the Yankees. Not the first time we said that this offseason, either with Cody Bellinger going to the Yankees, but this time it's Paul Goldschmidt, 1 year, $12.5 million.
I gave the Yankees a C. I love Goldie, and I hope he finishes out his career on a strong note, but it feels like the Yankees have already tried this with Anthony Rizzo, who was a part of the same free agency class as Goldschmidt, though, old guys, right? Goldschmidt's going to be entering his age 37 season, and the number of walks he's able to draw has drastically dropped already. He's closer to a Joey Gallo than he is to a Euclid at this point of his career. So I don't get it.
Yeah. It's been a pretty steep fall off for the 2022 NL MVP. He had a 6.8 WAR in that MVP season in 22, 3.4 WAR in 23, and then a 1.1 WAR in 154 games in 2024 with the Cardinals. I just don't think this moves the needle much for me. I think he's incrementally better than Rizzo, but you're not saying, oh, we're going to be so much better this year because we got Paul Goldschmidt instead of Anthony Rizzo. I'd be shocked if he posts that even close to that 3.4 WAR that he did in 2023. If he does, then it's a good signing. If he doesn't, then I think you kind of just put yourself in another year of purgatory at the first base position. I would have liked them to go get Christian Walker, or maybe not Naylor, because Naylor, I guess, kind of has some beef with the team a little bit. Maybe Nathaniel Lowe could have worked as well too. Would have added a different style of bats to that lineup, but I give it a C-. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think they got worse than what they could have been with this move. Next up, we got a trade. A couple of trades here that are, I would say, weird trades, and we got this with the Cody Bellinger trade last week as well too, where it's guys on somewhat expiring deals for quite literally nothing. Josh Naylor goes to Arizona in this one for Slade, Ceccioni, and a comp pick. Definitely grades out to be a good move for Arizona, though.
Yeah, I have Arizona winning the trade, of course, with a B+ here. They filled a massive need after losing Christian Walker. Naylor is probably going to be a 30-homer guy for the rest of his career, you would hope, if he stays right on track to what he's been doing. Cleveland, I'm going to give it a D+. right? Slade is the former top prospect, but he's still a massive project. It's not a guy you're going to want throwing important innings yet. Cleveland's probably going to try to rebuild themselves a new Josh Naylor with that draft pick. That seems to be the most important part of the deal here. I just don't like splitting up the Naylor brothers.
Yeah. Well, they're already kind of split up because Miles is with the eights too, but splitting up Bo and Josh is definitely a tough one. I'll start off with Arizona. So Naylor's a free agent after season's end, and I think that's why they didn't have to give up too much. He's definitely worse than Christian Walker, I would say, but he's definitely also cheaper at this moment. You're not going to have to pay him the $20 million this year. It's just whatever his arbitration is, and he didn't have to give up much. So I think it's an A move for Arizona. They did a good job in replacing Christian Walker, but it's also not a long-term deal either. So it's just year to year at this point. But I definitely think it helps their 2025 team. For Cleveland, it just doesn't make a ton of sense because you would think trading Naylor would mean that you open up the spot for Kyle Manzardo, who's one of your top prospects. But within 5 minutes of trading Josh Naylor, you got Carlos Santana back for his third stint on the Guardians. And so it just doesn't make a ton of sense for me in that spot. Slade Ceccioni, who they got back, I think they can turn into a solid bullpen arm. I don't think it works in the rotation. He had like a 6.6 ERA this past year, but he throws hard, has good stuff, plus stuff, but just minus control completely. The pick, I guess I like getting the pick back because you have the ability to kind of just take whoever you want in the draft, which is kind of cool. But I give it a D for Cleveland. I don't like this move. And I usually like a lot of Cleveland's moves, and it's just not. This one is not a big one for me.
Yeah.
Next up, Nathaniel Lowe to Washington for left-handed pitcher Robert Garcia.
I see this one as a win-win, one of the first ones of the week. Washington, they get a B+ for Nate Lowe. Nathaniel, I guess he goes by now. I know there's Nate Lowe and Lau. I believe this one is Lowe. Right?
I just say Lau, but I don't know if whatever. Okay. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, big Nate Dogg, first baseman, consistent gap power and multiple years of service time. Definitely going to help out that Washington lineup. And I'm going to give Texas not a bad B grade for bringing in the big lefty from UC Davis. He's had a ridiculously good FIP throughout his career, maybe a sign of a potential breakout season. So I'm intrigued by both sides.
Now, I'll start off with Washington. Nathaniel Lowe, I saw this trade and I immediately thought, okay, Nathaniel Lowe's got 1 year and then he goes into a free agency, but he doesn't. He's got another year after that, so he's going to be a national for 2 years if they don't trade him or anything like that. I think it adds a ton of balance to their super young lineup that they have right now, and having a vet that just gets on base. I don't think he's going to be a 30-homer guy. I believe his career high is 27, but I don't think that's who he is at this point in his career. But he's posted a 12.6 or higher walk rate over the past 2 seasons, and that means something for a super young lineup that's going to include James Wood and Dylan Cruz. Right now, Fangraphs has Lau hitting 4th, I want to say. I think I'd probably hit him 2nd and then put Cruz or leading off and then Wood maybe right behind him. That way you have James Wood hitting with some more guys on base. But I like this for them. I think it's a definitely needed vet that they had to add this offseason. So I give it an A for them. On Texas's side, it wasn't necessarily a need to have Nathaniel Lowe, but I definitely think they could have gotten back more for a pretty good first baseman. And I know Naylor didn't get a ton back, and Goldschmidt didn't get a ton of money, and Christian Walker, getting $20 million or whatever. But I definitely think they could have use their bargaining chip a bit better with Nathaniel Lowe, with all the teams that have needed first basemen this offseason. Maybe go to the Yankees, and I think you get a bit more than Robert Garcia. So I give it a D+ or D-, actually. I do think Garcia provides back-end lefty value. He has good K rates, but he doesn't – it's not like, oh, wow, they're so much better now with Robert Garcia. In hindsight, we do know that the Rangers made another move right after this to kind of back it up. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes and what our thoughts are on that. But this move specifically, I don't like for Texas, and I'll give it D-. Next up, Jesus Luzardo to the Phillies for Starlyn, Caba, and Emaarion Boyd. Interdivision trade for Peter Bendix and his dismantle of the Marlins.
Yeah, I'm going to give Philly an A for this one. This immediately becomes one of the deepest starting rotations in baseball. Luzardo had a tough year in Miami this recent year dealing with injuries and his 5 ERA, but he's only 1 year removed from a 200 strikeout season. He's got all the potential in the world. Miami, I'm going to give them a C plus. They do get a new number 3 prospect in the organization with Starlyn Caba, but it looks like he's so far just a defensive-minded shortstop. Only 19 years old, lots of room to grow, but if that's the face of the move here, you're not going to win the trade yet.
Yeah. I'll start off with the Phillies. I give them an A minus. I think adding Jesus Luzardo instantly gives the Phillies one of the deepest rotations in all of baseball. It helps make the regular season easier because they were starting Taijuan Walker in some of those 5-starter games in the middle of the season because of the money that they owed him instead of Spencer Turnbull, who's probably more deserving. But it helps make the regular season easier and also gives you a guy that can start playoff games. I don't really know who he's going to take playoff starts away from because I kind of like all 4 other guys, but maybe instead of Sanchez, you roll out Luzardo instead. He's a free agent after 26, so you have 2 years with him under control, and the Phillies have the ability to re-sign him after that as well too. You pay for the 2023 version of this guy, and I think that's probably the most likely guy that they get, where he had an expected ERA under 4, pitched 178 innings with a 10.5 K per 9. He's got really good stuff on the left side, and obviously there's a ton of potential there. We saw it as A's fans when he was one of our top prospects, and now the Phillies are going to see it with him in their rotation. On the other side of this, Miami, I don't love as much. They continue to dismantle the roster. Caba is an interesting prospect. He's only like 5'9", 160 pounds, only 19 years old, but he reminds me a lot of Xavier Edwards, who did have a really good second half of the season for the Marlins. So there's some upside there, I guess, with him. I believe he's like ranked 83rd or something like that on MLB Pipeline's prospects, but I think that probably gets updated to him being outside of the top 100 when the season ends up getting to start and they redo the rankings. Boyd is kind of the same type of guy, except for plays outfield and isn't switch hitting. 60 grade hit tool and 70 grade speed, according to Fangraphs. Not a ton of pop either. I think Caba and Boyd in their minor league careers combined have like 6 homers or something like that. So
Are they trying to luck themselves into another Jazz Chisholm? Is that what they're trying to do?
They don't hit the ball at the ballpark. I don't like this move. When you don't have to do it, I've never liked the idea of moving for sure talent for maybe talent. And that's exactly what the Marlins are doing here. What they're doing now, though, is like they're just stacking up so many guys that they expect to hit on a few of them. Mm-hmm. And from there, they all should be coming up at the same time. And maybe it works out, but it can also be kind of confusing to navigate all that stuff. And it very easy to mess up. So I give Miami a C because I think there is some potential in these guys, but Luzardo's a pretty damn good pitcher from the left side. Next up, Joc Pederson going to the Rangers. This is that Rangers move that I was talking about. 2 for $37, a second-year player option for that second year of that deal. I believe it's like $18.5 million is the AAV. What do you grade this one?
I gave this move a B+, the same move that I gave them for bringing in Robert Garcia, because we do have that hindsight, right? And I think the overall haul of Joc Pederson, along with Robert Garcia, evens this thing out a little bit, because it kind of felt like Texas was unhappy with the supporting cast they had of first base DH. And here they grab a well-established guy this time around in hopes of another title run. This guy has done that before with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I like this deal for the Rangers. This is one of the best platoon bats in the league in Joc Pederson versus righties last year. He became kind of a baby Juan Soto, and the way that he gets on base, he has ridiculous pop, and he's very feared as a hitter as well too. Definitely gives a better matchup versus right-handed pitchers where they struggled in 2024 compared to that 2023 World Series team. I like this move a lot. Obviously, you kind of have to pay a pretty penny in this platoon. $18.5 million is probably the most expensive platoon in baseball, but It makes sense. You want to get better at doing a certain thing. Joc Pederson is the best way to get better at doing that. So I give it an A. Next up, we'll finish with a couple of signings for pitchers. Starting off with Manaea, who got 3 for $75 fully guaranteed. No player option, team option, club option, or anything like that in there. So he goes back to the Mets.
Yeah, I'm giving the Mets an A for this one. I think if you're all in, you can't leave any weakness behind, like missing pieces from the rotation. So bringing back Manaea is huge for the Mets. Everybody could use a guy that starts 30 games and then shoves in the postseason. I think it's kind of a perfect fit for him.
Yeah, I like this signing, I do, but I'm not as high on it. I definitely think the playoffs pushed up his price, and the Mets were willing to answer because they knew they kind of needed to fill in that spot, especially if they're not going to get a Corbin Burns or a Max Fried in this offseason, which we obviously know they're not getting Max Fried, but Corbin Burns maybe still a question mark. 181 innings pitched in 2024 is super valuable, striking out over one guy per innings pitched, and an expected ERA at 3.75 is a pretty damn good season. I do think it's a slight bit overpay. $25 million a year is a lot for Manaea. I give it a B minus. I still like the signing. I definitely think it was a necessary move for the Mets to make, but I'm not like, oh wow, this is going to make a huge difference for them because one, he was already there, and two, he isn't. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be an ace. So that was his best season last year, and I think that's probably the top of what we'll see from him at most. Next up, last one, Walker Buehler going to the Boston Red Sox.
Similar with the Manaea move, I'm probably going to overgrade him a little bit with the A minus, but I mentioned this earlier with Patrick Sandoval. If you think it's time to go, having a guy like Walker Buehler in the clubhouse is going to be a massive advantage. The Red Sox are no strangers when it comes to this kind of move. It makes sense to start investing into the rotation right when your top prospects are about to come up. You want to try to hit it right in that perfect stride, not miss your window. So I love it. I love what Boston's doing, and I can't wait to do season predictions now after some of these moves because they really needed a couple of arms, and they got some guys, maybe injury history, but if it works, they're going to win a ton of games.
Yeah. I did think it was funny. He signed for 1 year, $21.05 million, which is the exact same qualifying offer. Kind of interesting there. I don't know what that was all about, but he fits right into this 2025 rotation for the Boston Red Sox. I do think it's a high risk, high reward play because you're paying him kind of based off of his postseason performance and also the potential ability that he has. Because if you just say put Walker Buehler on a non-playoff team last year, say, I don't know, like the Angels instead of the Dodgers, and you look at his regular season performance and you see the 5.3, and you see I watched a few of his starts because I was pumped to see Walker Buehler back, and I just saw stuff and I was like, not really there. I think if he just goes into the offseason off of that, it's probably 1 year for $10 million. But what he did in the playoffs, closing out the World Series for the Dodgers, and just I think his start specifically against the Mets in New York in the NLCS series where his sweeper was just like otherworldly is really fucking good. And I think that start alone got him this contract. And it has two different ways this plays out. Either he goes below expectations and kind of shows a better version of that 2024 Walker Buehler regular season and gets a 3 for 45 next year with some team, or he goes back to his previous ways and lands a $100 million contract next offseason. Either way, I think this is a necessary risk for the Boston Red Sox to take if they want to compete in the AL East next year. It's going to be tough to do because they're going to have a lot of moving parts with the young guys, and sometimes it takes it longer than your first regular season to really get into being competitive. But I like this for the Red Sox. I give it a B plus. But it does feel like a 1 year ordeal, nothing more than that. Moving on from that, we'll get into halftime or second half, whatever you want to call it, starting with Skyler's new mock draft.
Yeah, just got one thing in here for today. Like I said, we're going to keep things short and sweet when it's not the main dish for this episode 224. So I didn't do the full 32 picks, but we got a brand new top 12 all rearranged after this week. So let's talk about some of the top picks in the draft. We'll start off at number 1. We both mentioned it earlier. Probably Shedeur Sanders if the Giants are picking there. Who knows if they're going to have a new GM, possibly owner, head coach. But I think Shedeur Sanders could probably handle New York better than most of the rookie quarterbacks in this class. At number 2, we got New England. As of right now, I think everyone's on board with Travis Hunter. He had an awesome season, obviously won the Heisman Trophy. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a lineman. It's a very big need for New England, protecting their quarterback, but you don't see Travis Hunter very often not go number 1. At number 3, Jacksonville, I have them taking the tackle, Will Campbell, out of LSU. They need to protect Trevor Lawrence. They drafted a receiver in the first round last year. They got a lot of good pieces on defense, but you probably don't want to take another first rounder there. At number 4, Tennessee, another one we hinted at. We both have new guys moving in, whether it's a veteran or a young guy like J.J. McCarthy. You got to get him another receiver. How about Tedero McMillan, Arizona, 6'5", massive catch radius. At 5, Cleveland, another team, I guess you could argue could take a quarterback, but I have Kelvin Banks, tackle from Texas. Whoever's back there, you got to protect them. They haven't been able to run the ball that well this year. That's pretty much their entire identity. So bring in some O-line, I guess. Try to fix that. At number 6, it's the Raiders. I have Cam Ward. In reality, they're probably trading up to 2, 3, 4 for this guy just in case. You never know what's going to happen. But I think they're going to be able to get one of the top 2 guys. At number 7, the Panthers, one I mentioned last week, they kind of accidentally leaked their draft board when Bryce Young started playing better. They're looking at edge. Right now, the top guys, Abdul Carter, Penn State, had a great playoff game against SMU. Now they're playing Boise. Can't wait to watch him. At number 8, the Jets. Again, we have no idea because we don't have a GM at the moment, but I have a feeling we're going to work through the trenches. We're going to try to get well-coached guys that don't rough the passer on third down every time. So how about Mason Graham, D-tackle from Michigan? At number 9, I switched things up with the Bears, actually. I know Swift is having a pretty good season, but I gave him Ashton Genty. I feel like if the top 2 tackles do go early, maybe they would push and maybe trade back or try to grab a guy in the second round instead. If they stick here, how about Ashton Genty? Offense has always been a problem with the Bears. Here's a guy who plays a position not a lot of people talk about, running back, but there's kind of been a resurgence this season. Maybe we do see him go in the top 10. I'll just go through the 12. I did 12 picks. So number 10, New Orleans. I have them just taking the best edge rusher available, Mykel Williams. There's a lot of problems, but they do owe guys contracts on the offensive side. So just financially, they're probably going to be looking at the defense. They also traded a corner. This could be a spot for Will Johnson, potentially. At number 11, it's the Niners. Didn't think we'd see him here, but Trent Williams is already out for the season. He's not playing. We don't know if he's coming back either. Let's give him a tackle. Ariante Ursary, massive dude from Minnesota. Played left tackle in the Big Ten. Very solid. And at number 12, I do have the Dolphins taking Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. He's a guy I could definitely see slipping because he just didn't play this season. And I know Alex will mention it during the summer. I had him as my number 1 player. Jalen Ramsey just got hurt last week and is getting up there in age. Javon Holland could be leaving. They're probably looking secondary or O-line. So that's the top 12. I mentioned it to you earlier. It's kind of a weird draft class, right? We know there's about 10 really good players, and after that, the order is completely up in the air. So it's going to be fun. If you need an edge rusher, though, good class for that.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on from that, though, we'll get into our layups bowl predictions from last week. We won't have any picks this week of college or at least a CFP, because we'll have that next week. Next games start on next Tuesday night, which is a weird scenario. We have football on Tuesday and Wednesday, but that means we'll be able to do our picks for next episode, like right before the games, which is really cool. But as far as last week's layups and bowl predictions go, our layups, they were good. I had Penn State and Notre Dame winning. That was green. Skyler had Notre Dame -7 versus Indiana. That hit, of course. This week, I have the Titans -1 versus Jacksonville. I liked what the Titans showed in the second half last week in a game that they were could just rolled over and lost by 40. Instead, they only lose by, I think, 8 points. And I think Jacksonville sucks. So I'll give the win to Tennessee. They're -1 in this. So I guess, just practically got to win, and that should hit. Skyler, tell me about your pick.
Yeah, also going with an NFL pick here. I'm going to go with the Panthers to cover +8 points on the road in Tampa Bay. Carolina looked really good last week. They won in overtime against Arizona. Bryce Young is heating up. Tampa Bay did not look great. Outside of Baker Mayfield, really quiet against Dallas. Little bit of an upset loss there. So I'm going to have Carolina covering the 8 points. Tampa Bay should probably win, get themselves into the playoffs, but you never know in that division. Carolina's playing good.
Yeah. Last week, bold prediction, I had Clemson winning. That obviously did not happen. It wasn't really a bad showing from Clemson, but just some early first half turnovers kind of put them in a bad spot. But I thought they played well in the second half to make it somewhat of a game. Obviously, still did not hit, though, so that's red. Skyler had North Dakota State over South Dakota State and Kansas City over Houston. That hit, so good for Skyler there. This week, I have Chicago money line versus Seattle on Thursday Night Football. I believe it's like a +140 or something like that. I think Seattle's favored by like 3.5. So I think Chicago wins at home. I think there's a chance that Geno just has a bad couple interceptions, and Caleb Williams finally has one of his good games turn into a win.
For my bold prediction, I'm going with the first game tomorrow on Christmas morning. That's Pittsburgh +130 at home against Kansas City. This is typically a week where we see Kansas City slip up sometimes, getting ready for the playoffs. Maybe they'll overlook a team like Pittsburgh, who didn't play well last week, but a very good defense. This should be a low-scoring game, and I know Kansas City's got some magic in their way this season with the missed field goals and blocked kicks and fumbles and penalties. But let's hope Pittsburgh can flip that this week. Week 16.
Yeah.
17. Sheesh.
So I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
In the Bears' 9-game losing streak, Caleb Williams hasn't thrown a single pick.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I know he's been good, but
I think it was Big Cat, actually. He's like, I actually don't like this. I want a quarterback who throws picks. All right, Big Cat. Go trade for Brett Favre then, man.
His last 5 games, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. But I don't know. I don't think it's Caleb Williams' fault in Chicago. I think they finally get a win, which would be pretty cool. But that's going to do it for episode 224. Next week we'll be on New Year's Eve, which will be a fun one as well, too. Power rankings and some other stuff with that as well. College football picks, of course, for the playoff. But Merry Christmas, of course, or Merry Christmas Eve, or Happy Kwanzaa, or whatever you're celebrating. So happy holidays. I don't know. What, you got anything else?
Happy holidays. Let's hope no more of our players get carted off next week, and let's just get to next season.
Yeah, I'm there.
All right.